The dust settled on the chapel floor like fallen prayers as Father Miguel Torres knelt before the altar, his weathered hands trembling against the worn wooden rail. The late afternoon sun streamed through the cracked, stained glass, painting fractured rainbows across the adobe walls of the small frontier church. He had been preparing for evening mass when she walked in, the woman who had haunted his dreams for 7 years. Alina Ramirez stood silhouetted in the doorway, her dark hair catching the golden light like spun copper. Time had carved new lines around her eyes, but she was still the most beautiful woman he had ever seen. Still the woman he had loved. Still the woman he had lost. "Miguel," she whispered, her voice carrying the weight of all their unspoken words. He rose slowly, his black cassock rustling in the heavy silence. "Alina, I heard you were back in Santa Rosa." She stepped inside, letting the heavy wooden door close behind her with a sound like thunder. "I needed to see you before ... double quotes." She paused, her fingers worrying the edge of her shawl. "Before I marry Thomas Morrison tomorrow." The name hit him like a physical blow. Thomas Morrison, the wealthy cattle baron who had been courting Alina through letters for months. A practical match, everyone said. A chance for security in a harsh land where survival often mattered more than love. Miguel had known this day would come, had prepared for it through countless prayers and sleepless nights. But seeing her here, in his sanctuary, brought back every memory he had tried to bury. "Congratulations," he managed, though the word tasted like ashes in his mouth. Elena's laugh was bitter. "Is that what you say to all the brides who visit before their wedding?" Even the ones who she stopped herself, but they both knew what she had been about to say. Even the ones who had once promised to love another. 7 years ago, Miguel Torres had been a different man. He had worked his father's ranch just outside Santa Rosa, building a life with calloused hands and dreams of a future that included Alina by his side. They had been childhood sweethearts, their love growing from innocent affection into something deeper, more profound than either had imagined possible. But then the cholera came. It swept through the valley like the angel of death, claiming Miguel's parents, his younger sister, half the town. In his grief and desperation, he had made a bargain with God that the dying would be spared. If Alina would be kept safe, he would dedicate his life to serving the Almighty. The dying had stopped. Alina had lived. And Miguel had kept his word, selling the ranch and traveling east to seminary, leaving behind everything he loved, including her. "Why didn't you tell me?" Elena's voice broke through his memories. She had moved closer, close enough that he could smell the familiar scent of jasmine in her hair. "Why didn't you explain why you were leaving?" What was I supposed to say? Miguel turned away, unable to meet her eyes. "That I made a deal with God? That your life was worth more to me than my own happiness?" "Yes." The word exploded from her like gunfire. "You should have told me that. You should have told me that you loved me enough to sacrifice everything for me." He spun back to face her, his careful composure cracking. "And what would that have changed, Alina? I still would have had to leave. I still would have had to choose between my vows to God and my love for you, but I would have understood." Tears glittered in her dark eyes. "Do you know what I thought? I thought you had grown tired of me. I thought you had decided I wasn't worth staying for." The confession hit him like a blow to the chest. In all his preparations for this life, all his prayers and penance, he had never considered how his departure might have seemed to her. He had been so focused on his own sacrifice that he had forgotten Alina would need to make sense of his leaving too. "I waited for you," she continued, her voice barely above a whisper. "For 2 years, I waited. Even when everyone told me you weren't coming back, even when they said I was foolish for turning down other suitors. I waited because I believed what we had was real. It was real." The words tore from his throat. "It is real. God forgive me. It's the most real thing I've ever felt." For a moment, they stood frozen in the golden light, the weight of 7 years hanging between them like smoke from an altar candle. Then Alina stepped closer, reaching up to touch his face with trembling fingers. "Do you think my body is sacred too?" she asked, her voice so soft he almost missed the words. The question hung in the air between them. loaded with all the longing and loss they had carried for 7 years. Miguel felt his carefully constructed walls beginning to crumble. This woman, this beautiful, fierce, impossible woman, had been the other half of his soul. Even his devotion to God couldn't change that. But before he could answer, before he could even process what his answer might be, the chapel door burst open. Thomas Morrison strode in, his expensive boots echoing against the stone floor. He was a big man, broad-shouldered and commanding, the kind of confidence that came from owning half the territory. "Alina," he said, his voice tight with barely controlled anger. "I should have known I'd find you here." Alina dropped her hand and stepped back. "Thomas, I told you I needed time to prepare for tomorrow by visiting your former lover." Morrison's gaze shifted to Miguel, and there was something dangerous in his pale blue eyes. "Reverend, I trust you've been offering my bride-to-be spiritual guidance." Miguel straightened, finding his voice. Alina came seeking counsel, as many do before taking such an important step. Counsel. Morrison's laugh was ugly. "Is that what they're calling it now?" He moved closer to Alina, his hand settling possessively on her arm. "Come, darling. We have arrangements to finalize for tomorrow. The judge is waiting." "The judge?" Alina frowned. "I thought we were having the ceremony here with Father Torres." Morrison's smile was cold. "Change of plans. Judge Harrison is performing the ceremony at the hotel." More. Appropriate for a civil union, Miguel understood immediately. Morrison didn't want Alina married in the church, didn't want her taking vows before God that might somehow complicate his claim on her. It was a calculated move from a calculating man. "Alina," Miguel said quietly, "if you prefer a religious ceremony, the lady prefers whatever her future husband prefers." Morrison cut him off. His grip on Alina's arm tightened. "Don't you, darling?" For a moment, Miguel thought Alina might protest. He saw the flash of anger in her eyes, the set of her jaw that he remembered from their childhood arguments. But then something seemed to deflate in her, and she nodded. "Of course," she said hollowly. "Whatever you think is best." As Morrison led her toward the door, Alina looked back over her shoulder. Her eyes met Miguel's across the chapel, and in them he read a message that stopped his heart. Asterisk, save me. Asterisk, then she was gone, leaving Miguel alone with the shadows and the weight of his impossible love. That night, Miguel knelt before the altar until his knees ached and his prayers became pleas. He had given his life to God, had kept his vows faithfully for 7 years. But seeing Alina again, seeing the resignation in her eyes as Morrison led her away, had awakened something in him that all his prayers couldn't quiet. Was love itself not sacred? Was the bond between two souls not also blessed by the divine? The questions tormented him through the long hours of darkness. By dawn, he had made his decision. The Morrison Ramirez wedding was set for noon at the Grand Hotel, the finest establishment in Santa Rosa. Miguel arrived early, positioning himself in the back of the crowded room as guests filled the ornate parlor. He wore his plainest clothes, hoping to blend in with the townspeople who had come to witness the union of Alina Ramirez and Thomas Morrison. Alina appeared at the top of the staircase like a vision in white silk, her grandmother's lace mantilla flowing behind her. She was breathtaking, but Miguel could see the sadness in her eyes, the way her smile never quite reached them. Morrison waited at the makeshift altar, resplendent in his finest suit, a satisfied smile on his weathered face. Judge Harrison stood between them with his leather-bound book, clearing his throat as the room fell silent. "Dearly beloved," the judge began, "we are gathered here today to witness the union of Thomas Morrison and Alina Ramirez in holy matrimony." Wars. Miguel watched from the shadows, his heart breaking with every word. This was wrong. Alina belonged with someone who loved her for who she was, not what she could provide. Someone who would cherish her spirit, not break it. Someone like him. If anyone has just cause why these two should not be wed, Judge Harrison continued, let them speak now or forever hold their peace. The words hung in the air like a challenge. Miguel felt every eye in the room, felt the weight of his vows and his love pressing down on him like stones. Alina's gaze found his across the crowded room, and in that moment, He saw not resignation but hope. Asterisk, save me. Asterisk, her eyes pleaded. Asterisk, save us both. Asterisk. I object, he said, his voice carrying clearly across the suddenly silent room. A gasp ran through the crowd like wildfire. Morrison's face darkened with rage. But Elena smiled for the first time all day, and it was like watching the sunrise. On what grounds? Judge Harrison demanded. Miguel stepped forward, his heart pounding but his voice steady. On the grounds that the bride has already promised to another? That's a lie. Morrison snarled, his hand moving toward the gun at his hip. Is it? Miguel's gaze never left Elena's face. Elena, 7 years ago, did you not promise to love me forever? I did, she whispered, then louder. I did, and did I not promise the same to you? You did. Tears were streaming down her face now, but they were tears of joy. You promised me forever, Miguel Torres. Morrison's face was purple with rage. This is preposterous. You're a priest. You can't marry her. Miguel turned to face the angry cattle baron. I was never ordained, he said simply. I left seminary before taking my final vows. I've been serving this community as a lay minister. But I am free to marry whomever I choose. It wasn't entirely true he had taken preliminary vows that would need to be formally dissolved. But in this moment, facing the woman he loved, and the future they might still have together, Miguel found he cared more about truth than technicalities. Morrison's hand closed around his gun. You're not taking her from me, he growled. I've paid good money for this match. Made agreements with her father. My father is dead, Lena said quietly, lifting her chin with the defiance Miguel remembered and loved. And I am not property to be bought and sold. Elena, Miguel said, holding out his hand to her. Come with me. We'll build the life we always dreamed of. It won't be easy, and it won't be rich, but it will be ours. For a moment, she hesitated. Miguel's heart nearly stopped. Then Elena gathered up her silk skirts and stepped down from the makeshift altar, moving past the shocked guests toward the man who had always held her heart. You won't get away with this, Morrison snarled, his gun half-drawn. Yes, we will, said a new voice from the doorway. Sheriff Martinez stepped into the room, his own weapon drawn and trained on Morrison. I've been investigating your business dealings. Tom, seems you've been claiming water rights that don't belong to you, running cattle on land you don't own. The territorial governor is very interested in having a conversation with you. Morrison's face went white. In the confusion that followed the sheriff making his arrest, the guests buzzing with shock and excitement, Miguel and Elena slipped out the back door of the hotel. They ran through the dusty streets of Santa Rosa like children, laughing and crying at the same time until they reached the small cemetery behind Miguel's chapel. There, among the weathered headstones and desert wildflowers, they finally stopped. Are you sure? Miguel asked, taking her hands in his. I can offer you nothing but love, Elena. No grand house. No security. She silenced him with a kiss, soft and sweet and full of 7 years of longing. Love is everything, she whispered against his lips. Love is the only thing that's ever mattered. As the sun set over the New Mexico territory, painting the sky in shades of gold and crimson, Miguel and Elena knelt together before the simple wooden cross that marked his parents' grave. There in the presence of God in the endless western sky, they spoke the vows they should have spoken 7 years ago. Do you, Miguel Torres, take Elena Ramirez to be your wife, to love and cherish for all the days of your life? I do, he said, his voice strong and sure. I have loved her since I was a boy, and I will love her until the stars fall from the sky. And do you, Elena Ramirez, take Miguel Torres to be your husband, through poverty and hardship, in sickness and health, for all the days of your life? I do, she replied, tears streaming down her face. He is the other half of my soul. Without him, I am only half alive. They had no rings, no witness, but God and the desert wind. But as they kissed in the fading light, Miguel knew that this was the most sacred moment of his life. Not because of any ceremony or blessing, but because it was born of love freely given and faithfully kept. 3 months later, Alina stood in the doorway of their small adobe house, watching Miguel tend to their modest vegetable garden. She pressed a hand to her still flat belly, smiling at the secret growing there. They had rebuilt his father's ranch with their own hands, working side by side to create something beautiful from the ashes of the past. It wasn't the life of luxury Morrison could have given her, but it was theirs. "Miguel," she called softly. He looked up, his face lighting with the smile that had captured her heart so many years ago. "Do you ever regret it? Giving up your calling for me?" He set down his tools and crossed to her, taking her in his arms as the desert sunset painted the world in gold. "Me, Alina," he said, pressing his forehead to hers. "You are my calling. You always have been. God didn't call me to serve in a chapel. He called me to serve love itself, in all its sacred forms." She smiled, reaching up to trace the strong line of his jaw. "Even my body? Do you think it's sacred too?" "Everything about you is sacred," he whispered. And as he kissed her beneath the endless western sky, Alina knew they had finally found their way home. Not to a place, but to each other where they had always belonged. In the distance, church bells chimed the evening hour, but Miguel and Alina heard only the sound of their own hearts beating in perfect rhythm, a song of love that would echo through all their days to come. The morning sun cast long shadows across the valley as Alina stepped out of their adobe home, her hand resting protectively over the gentle curve of her belly. 6 months had passed since that golden evening when she and Miguel had spoken their vows beneath the desert stars, and their love had only deepened with each passing day. But peace, Alina had learned, was a fragile thing in the harsh beauty of the New Mexico territory. Miguel emerged from the barn, his shirt damp with sweat from the morning's work. The sight of him still made her heart flutter, the way his dark hair caught the light, the gentle strength in his weathered hands, the devotion that shone in his eyes whenever he looked at her. "The Hernandez boy brought news from town," he said, crossing to her with that easy stride she loved. His hand joined hers on her belly, and she felt their child stir beneath their joined touch. Morrison posted bail. "He's back in Santa Rosa." Elena's blood chilled. Thomas Morrison had spent 3 months in the territorial prison while awaiting trial for his fraudulent land dealings. She had hoped they both had that justice would keep him locked away longer. "What does Sheriff Martinez say?" she asked, trying to keep the fear from her voice. Miguel's jaw tightened. "That we should be careful. Morrison's made threats, Alina, against both of us, but especially ... double quotes." He paused, his eyes dropping to her rounded belly. "Against our child." Alina finished the thought he couldn't bring himself to voice. She had known this day might come. Men like Morrison didn't forgive public humiliation, and Miguel's interference at their wedding had cost the cattle baron more than just a bride. It had cost him his reputation, his business dealings, and ultimately his freedom. "We could leave," Miguel said quietly. "Go to California or back east. Start over somewhere Morrison can't find us." Alina shook her head. "This is our home, Miguel. This is where your parents are buried, where we fell in love, where our child will be born. We don't run from bullies that afternoon." As Alina hung laundry in their small garden, she heard the thunder of approaching hoofbeats. Her heart lurched as she recognized the riders Morrison and 3 of his men, armed and dangerous looking. Miguel was in town buying supplies, and she was alone. Morrison dismounted with deliberate slowness, his cold blue eyes fixed on her swollen belly. Well, the little bride has been busy. What do you want, Thomas?" Alina forced her voice to remain steady, though her hands trembled as she set down the laundry basket. "Justice," he said simply. "That half-breed priest of yours cost me everything. My business, my reputation, my freedom. I think it's time I return the favor." "Miguel isn't a priest," Lena said, lifting her chin with the defiance that had always been her strength. "And he's not a half-breed. He's a good man who loved me enough to fight for me." Morrison's face darkened. "A good man doesn't steal another man's woman, especially not when contracts have been signed and money has changed hands. I was never your woman. I never agreed to marry you willingly. Your father agreed. That's all that mattered. Morrison stepped closer, and Alina caught the smell of whiskey on his breath. But don't worry, sweetheart. I'm not here for you. Not anymore. A pregnant woman is damaged goods, and I don't take soiled merchandise. Elena's hands instinctively moved to protect her belly. Then what do you want? Morrison's smile was cold as winter wind. I want Torres to suffer the way I've suffered. I want him to lose everything he holds dear, and I want him to watch it happen. The sound of a rifle being cocked split the air. Miguel stood at the corner of the house, his father's old Winchester trained on Morrison's chest. Get off my land, Miguel. Alina breathed his name like a prayer, relief flooding through her. Morrison's men reached for their guns, but Miguel's voice stopped them. I wouldn't. I can put 3 bullets in your boss before you clear leather. And my wife has her grandmother's Colt trained on you from the window. Alina glanced back and saw the curtain twitch in their bedroom window. She had to fight not to smile. There was no gun there. But Morrison's men didn't know that. This isn't over. Torres Morrison snarled, but he was already backing toward his horse. Yes. It is, Miguel said quietly. You lost, Morrison. You lost the woman. You lost your freedom, and you lost your hold over this valley. Accept it like a man, and move on. Morrison mounted his horse, his face twisted with rage. You think you've won? You think love conquers all? He laughed, the sound ugly and harsh. Wait until that half-breed bastard you're carrying is born. Wait until the good people of Santa Rosa see what happens when pure Spanish blood mixes with Indian filth. Then we'll see how much your precious love is worth. He spurred his horse hard, and the group thundered away in a cloud of dust. Leaving Miguel and Alina alone in the sudden quiet, Miguel lowered his rifle and crossed to Alina, pulling her into his arms. She could feel the tremor in his hands, the rapid beat of his heart against her cheek. He's right about one thing, she whispered against his chest. Miguel pulled back to look at her, concern creasing his brow. What? There will be talk. About our child, about your heritage, about us. Alina reached up to cup his face in her hands. Your great-grandmother was Apache. Some people in town already whisper about it. Miguel's mother had been the daughter of a Spanish rancher, and an Apache woman who had been captured and eventually married into the family. It was 3 generations past, but in a territory still raw from Indian wars, any native blood was viewed with suspicion by some. Does that frighten you? Miguel asked. Alina smiled, the expression fierce and proud. I'm frightened of many things, mi amor. I'm frightened of Morrison, of what he might do to hurt us. I'm frightened of childbirth, of whether I'll be a good mother. But I'm not frightened of loving you, and I'm not frightened of our child. Apache blood means strength, survival, connection to this land. Our baby will be blessed with the best of all worlds. Miguel kissed her then, soft and reverent, as if she were something precious that might break. How did I ever deserve you? You didn't, Alina said with a teasing smile. You just loved me enough to become worthy. That night, as they lay in their bed, listening to the coyotes sing in the distance, Alina felt Miguel's hands spread protectively over her belly. I've been thinking about what Morrison said, he admitted quietly. About what? About people talking when the baby comes. About how they might treat our child. Miguel's voice was heavy with worry. Maybe we should consider moving somewhere more accepting. Alina turned in his arms to face him in the moonlight streaming through their window. Miguel Torres, do you remember what you told me the night we were married? I told you many things that night. You told me that love is sacred in all its forms. That includes the love between parent and child, the love of family, the love of community. If people in Santa Rosa can't see the sacred in our child, then they're the ones missing something beautiful. Miguel was quiet for a long moment. And if they try to hurt our baby, what then? Then we fight, Alina said simply. We fight with love, with dignity, with the strength of our convictions. And if that's not enough, then we fight with everything else we have. But we don't run, and we don't hide what we are. 3 weeks later, Elena's pains began in the early hours of dawn. Miguel rode hard to fetch Dona Carmen, the midwife who had delivered half the babies in Santa Rosa. While Alina tried to breathe through the waves of sensation that rolled over her like desert storms. The labor was long and difficult. As the hours stretched on, Alina found herself drifting between consciousness and something deeper. A place where she could hear the voices of women who had come before her mother, her grandmother. Miguel's Apache great-grandmother she had never met, but somehow felt present in the room. Be strong, Mia asterisk, they seemed to whisper. Asterisk, this child is chosen. This child is sacred. Asterisk, when their daughter finally emerged into the world, her first cry was strong and clear, a sound like music in the quiet room. Dona Carmen placed the baby on Elena's chest, and Elena looked down into dark eyes that seemed wise beyond their minutes of life. She's perfect, Miguel whispered, his voice thick with tears. He reached out with one finger to stroke their daughter's tiny cheek. She's the most beautiful thing I've ever seen. The baby had Miguel's dark hair and Elena's stubborn chin. But her skin carried the golden tone that spoke of her mixed heritage. Alina knew that some would see only what made her different. But looking at her daughter, Alina saw only perfection. What shall we call her? Miguel asked. Alina had thought about names for months, but looking at her daughter now, only one seemed right. Esperanza, Hope. Esperanza Torres, Miguel said, testing the name. Yes, she carries all our hopes for the future. Dona Carmen cleaned the baby and wrapped her in a soft blanket. Alina had embroidered with tiny desert flowers. As the midwife worked, she spoke in the practical tone of a woman who had seen much life come into the world. You should know, she said quietly. Morrison has been asking questions in town. About when the baby was due, about who would attend the birth. I've told no one when I was coming here, but word has a way of traveling. Miguel's face darkened. He wouldn't dare come here. Not with Alina having just given birth. Dona Carmen's expression was grim. I've seen men like Morrison before, mijo. When pride is wounded deep enough, there's no telling what they might do. As if summoned by her words, the sound of horses reached them through the open window. Many horses riding hard toward the house. Miguel was on his feet instantly, reaching for his rifle. Stay with Alina and the baby, he told Dona Carmen. No matter what happens, protect them. Miguel, no. Alina struggled to sit up, still weak from the birth. Don't go out there alone, I have to, mi amor. I won't let him hurt our family. Alina watched through the window as Miguel stepped onto their front porch. His rifle ready, but not yet raised. Morrison and at least 6 men had surrounded the house, their weapons drawn. Congratulations, Torres, Morrison called out, his voice carrying clearly in the still air. I hear you're a father now. What do you want, Morrison? Justice, like I said. You cost me everything, so now I'm going to cost you everything. Morrison's smile was visible, even in the dim light. Starting with that half-breed baby of yours, Miguel raised his rifle. Over my dead body, that can be arranged. The standoff stretched taut as a bowstring. Alina could feel the violence hanging in the air like smoke, ready to ignite at the smallest spark. Her daughter stirred in her arms, making a small sound that seemed impossibly loud in the tense silence. Then, from the distance, came the sound of more horses. Many more. Sheriff Martinez rode into the yard with a dozen deputies, their weapons drawn and trained on Morrison's men. Behind them came Father Sebastian from the church, Dr. Morales, the Hernandez family, the Garcias, and what looked like half the town of Santa Rosa. That's enough, Morrison, Sheriff Martinez called out. You're outnumbered and outgunned. Surrender now, and maybe the judge will go easy on you. Morrison looked around at the crowd that had surrounded him, his face twisting with rage and disbelief. You're all making a mistake. That man stole my bride. That baby is an abomination. That man, said Father Sebastian, urging his horse forward, is one of the finest people I know. And that baby is a child of God, deserving of protection and love. Miguel Torres helped my family when the drought nearly killed our cattle, called out Senator Hernandez. He gave us water from his well when he barely had enough for himself. Alina delivered my grandson when the midwife couldn't make it through the storm, added Senora Garcia. She risked her own pregnancy to help us, one by one. The people of Santa Rosa spoke up, sharing stories of kindness and generosity, of the ways Miguel and Alina had become part of the fabric of their community. Alina listened from inside the house, tears streaming down her face as she realized how many lives they had touched. Without even knowing it, Morrison's men began to look uncertain, their weapons wavering as they found themselves facing not just the sheriff's deputies, but an entire community united in defense of the Torres family. "Surrender." "Morrison," Sheriff Martinez said again, "you're done here." For a moment, Morrison's hand tightened on his gun, and Alina held her breath. Then, with a curse, he threw his weapon to the ground. His men followed suit, and within minutes, they were all in custody. Miguel lowered his rifle and turned to face the crowd that had come to his defense. "I don't know what to say," he called out. "Thank you doesn't seem like enough." "You don't need to say anything," Mio called back. "Dona Rosa, the baker's wife. We take care of our own in Santa Rosa. You and Alina are family." As the crowd began to disperse and the sheriff led, Father Sebastian lingered on the porch with Miguel. "You know," the priest said with a gentle smile, "I've been wondering if you might be interested in helping me with the church. We could use a good man to help with services, counsel troubled souls, perform marriages for those who can't afford the fees." Miguel looked surprised. "But I'm not ordained, Father. Neither was Joseph when he raised the Christ child. What matters isn't the papers you carry, it's the love in your heart and the service you give to others." Father Sebastian clapped Miguel on the shoulder. "Think about it. The church could use a man who understands that the sacred exists in many forms." Inside the house, Alina listened to the conversation with wonder. Miguel had thought his calling to serve God was lost when he chose love over vows. But perhaps, like everything else in their story, it had simply been transformed into something even more beautiful. Later that night, after the visitors had gone and the house was quiet, Miguel sat beside Elena's bed holding their daughter. Esperanza was awake, her dark eyes seeming to take in everything around her with calm curiosity. "Do you think she knows?" Miguel asked softly. "How much her life has already changed ours?" Alina reached out to stroke her daughter's tiny hand. "I think she knows she's loved, and I think that's enough for now." "Morrison was wrong," Miguel said suddenly. "About what?" "About love not being enough to conquer everything. Look what happened tonight, Alina. When we needed help, when our family was threatened, love brought an entire community to our defense. Love did conquer all." Alina smiled, thinking of all the people who had ridden through the darkness to protect them, neighbors who had become family, strangers who had become friends, a community that had chosen to see the sacred in their love, rather than the scandal. "Our daughter will grow up, knowing she belongs here," Miguel continued. "She'll know that her heritage, all of ITA, is something to be proud of, and she'll know that love, in all its forms, is the most sacred thing there is," as if in response to her father's words. Esperanza made a small sound that might have been agreement. Alina laughed softly, reaching out to touch Miguel's face. "Do you remember what I asked you that day in the chapel?" she said. "About whether you thought my body was sacred?" Miguel's eyes filled with tenderness. "I remember. I know the answer now. Everything that creates love is sacred. Everything that nurtures life is sacred. This house, this family, this community that protects us, it's all sacred ground." Miguel leaned down to kiss her forehead and pressed a gentle kiss to their daughter's head. "Sacred ground," he repeated. "I like that." Outside their window, the desert stretched endlessly under a canopy of stars. The same stars that had witnessed their first kiss years ago, their wedding vows under the open sky, and now the birth of their child. The harsh land that had tested them, challenged them, and ultimately embraced them. As Alina drifted towards sleep, their daughter safe in Miguel's arms, she felt the presence of all the women who had come before her mother, her grandmother, Miguel's Apache great-grandmother, and all the unnamed mothers who had loved and sacrificed and hoped for better lives for their children. Asterisk, thank you. Asterisk, she whispered to them silently. Asterisk, thank you for showing us that love is the only thing that's ever really mattered. Asterisk. And in the gentle desert wind that stirred the curtains, Alina could have sworn she heard their voices whispering back, asterisk, Donata mia. This is what we've always known. This is what we've always hoped you would learn. Asterisk, the sacred lived not in buildings or ceremonies, but in moments like this, a man holding his newborn daughter, a woman surrounded by the love she had fought to claim, a community choosing compassion over prejudice. It lived in the courage to love fully, to risk everything for the chance at happiness, to believe that the heart knew truths that the world sometimes forgot. It lived in the simple, profound miracle of family, chosen and born, blood and heart, stretching back through generations and forward into an uncertain but hopeful future.